African spirituality is founded on the understanding that life is cyclical. That is we don't live from birth to death and that is the end. It simply means that when I die as a body, I move on across the space as spirit, and I can also come back. Okay, it's seen as a secular existence. And not just that alone too, it also means that in our lives, there are entities that participate in our life. So the life of the physical, the life of the seen, the life of the known is intricately linked, woven into the life unknown. That was the whole thing. And at the top of all of this is the Almighty God. The concept of the Almighty God, as you know, which in my place simply has to do with the originator, the owner of souls. He's not the owner of souls because he bought them or because he conquered them. No, the owner of soul is so known because it is the originator. Is the one that originated, that created, if you want to use that word, souls. Okay, these are the things. You have all kinds of definitions, all kinds of names for the Almighty. That is how it goes. But the thing is this: in every activity that you are going to participate in, whether it is a prayer in the shrine or anywhere, the first order of prayer is that you give the dues to the Almighty. You adore Him, thank Him, and then before you go to your level. Was He the best? Who are you and who am I to say that a way that a certain people have chosen to live is not the best? This is one arrogance of imperialism that came to the space that started teaching people how to do things. You see, when you force people to do things in a certain way, you have taken away their liberty and you have in the process truncated their spirituality and their growth. The wise masters always say, all the masters, they say that spirituality is not taught, it is caught like an infection. In other words, your lifestyle, when it connects on a one-on-one relationship with your professions, your spiritual claims, then people are forced to admire you and want to be like you. In fact, they start acting, they start behaving like you because they have typed themselves to you without even knowing it, which is they using the element of identity to picture your lifestyle and connect with it with a sense of resonance. And then before you know what's happening, you start infecting people with your good life. But when spirituality becomes a jihad, when it becomes a crusade, where you have to take weapons to force it down the people, when it has to take the form of colonialism, imperialism, where you have to force your way down people's throats, then it becomes something else. It is no longer spirituality. It has now become a clash of entities. And we understand that it is the lower entities that clash amongst themselves in quest for territory. That's what has affected the African space. But the question will be this: if a human being is spiritual, it means that the person is connected to the unseen, the unknown, the most powerful. Then why then are they able to be conquered by external forces? It's as simple as this. Take away a people's connection to their spiritual source and they become easy to deal with. Okay, now what happened over the years is that there were gradual oversimplification of the tenet of spirituality. Like I was trying to explain earlier, that spirituality is something that a child gets groomed on from childhood. In Africa, the ideal spirituality is a totality. There was no spirituality, and then there was commercialism, there was relationship, there was no. The entire life of the African person was a spiritual structure. It was a spiritual continuum. When you were eating, you were being spiritual because you remembered your ancestor, you remembered your source. You remember that this body comes from the earth. Therefore, you must give reverence to the earth before you eat that food. You take a muscle, you cut it and throw it on the floor. The water you're using to wash your hands, you spill some on the floor and you make some pronouncements. Because you are respecting that. You are feeding this body, but the source of this body must be respected. It was a sense of connectedness. It wasn't, that was what do you call it? That was not Satanism. It was people being conscious, being aware. It's knowledge that was very deep. And then you get to the other side of it where knowledge was imparted through experiential exercise to the child. The child watches the way their parents walk, the way they talk, the way they lived, and spirituality was being imparted just by action. And then when a child did not understand certain things, they asked questions and they were answered. If they were not ready for the answer, the parents will keep quiet or tell them, don't worry. Why? Just don't ask such a question, your time has not come. All those kind of things. That was how the African space was structured. And then there was certain knowledge that were expected to have been imparted to a human being from the family. The parents were supposed to have taught certain things to the children. Those type of knowledge were taken for granted. And when the human being was of a certain age, he was expected to act in line with such knowledge. If that person was not acting in line with such a knowledge, he was considered unworthy to mix. Because that knowledge was not knowledge that you would be teaching somebody else. Because it is expected that the family should have taught this person. And if the family did not teach this person, then it simply means that the person was deemed unworthy to have been taught by the family because they didn't see him as one of them, then he must have been a bastard. Or the child was too wayward, and the family protected that waywardness from society, because when your child was really wayward, you called him out. That was the African way, and the community would deal with the person. There were ways of correction. In my village, I didn't come across any police station. I didn't come across any prison. But there were ways you could take people. Because a misbehavior mostly were seen as beyond the person most times. So there were some rites that would be performed. There's one in my place, they talk about unki. That is foolishness. Foolishness actually has to do with a sense that is not connected with the higher ideal. And anybody that behaved along that line was wayward and was unworthy of being introduced to the higher ideas of the physical society. Therefore, when a person was exhibiting certain traits that were seen to be foolish, it simply means that the data that were running, the programming that this person had, were strange. Society did not connect to such data. Therefore, they have to be expunged. There was a process with which they removed that. Some of them were 7 days, which is the minimum ones. Some of them were 21 days and even more. The person was somehow marked out for that purpose. And everybody that saw him will be blessing him, sending good wishes to him when they come across such a person, male or female, in the society. It was a way of correction. It was a way of bringing people back to life. It was not punitive in any way. But then there were knowledge that were esoteric, really, really esoteric, in the sense that you have to become worthy. Because if they gave it to you unworthily, you will undo not just yourself, but the society, and the person that gave you that knowledge will rue it, will suffer for it. That is why you had to be worthy. There were certain levels of maturity that you would attain before it could be given to you. Now, such knowledge over the years gradually faded out of Africa because the people who had them, the very few significant people who had them, did not find the right people to pass them to. Or those who had them that they passed them on to did not find the right people to accept it from them because they had followed another way they considered the better and most modern ways. In some instances too, it's not just because they follow another way that they consider most modern or something, because in every age there was always something that would always affect or militate against spiritual growth. You could see some people will embrace the cheaper ways, which is the way that if you have certain powers, use it to amass material gains. And at that level, you are talking about a wayward form of spiritual practice, which is not spirituality. but Spiritism. Some people came to the understanding that, oh, there are forces around that are working around us. There are spirits, therefore let me use them. Some people use the spirit of the dead to perform all kinds of things. That spirit of the dead that did not want to cross over. So they used them. You created a form of pseudo-spirituality called mediumism. And those are not spiritual. And it is not the way to serve the greater good of society. These things continued over the time, but it would be an error to class that as African spirituality. There is ancestral devotion. Every human being in Africa understood that they came from a channel. Their births, their mothers, their fathers were channels through which they came to this world. Therefore, somehow there was a form of divinity attached to them. First of all, when they were alive, they were revered, they were respected. When they died, they crossed over because they have taken off the shield that limited them. They are now found to be somehow pervasive, somehow very powerful. So they were now spirits. Now, the devotion that they gave to the ancestors, it was not what you call a worship. It was a form of solicitation, like you might call them mediatorial roles that they played. All right? That is one thing. You have to respect your ancestors. You have to give them some form of devotion. Even when they die, you know there is a rite that will perform to successfully, easily ease them out of the physical plane to go to the spiritual plane. You need to see it is beautiful. The dances, like in my place, they were a set of 4 songs and set of 4 movements that were used over the course of the days of the burial until the person was laid into the earth. There was these affirmations that were made by the graveside. See, affirmations were integrally African. They were part of the African life, because when you made affirmation, you were making a declaration, you were making laws that you wished to run and rule your experiences of life. They were not wishing talks. They were things that you believed in, that you have faith in, and it will work for you. So, by the graveside, Africans stood around the grave and started making affirmations on behalf of the dead. It's like persuading the dead, please, you are free to go. We have released you. You are going to come back a better person. If the person had only one house today, you will have 2 houses. Although Africans didn't have more than one house. Let's just say, if you had only 5 goats, when you come back, you're going to have 20 goats. They start wishing for you. If it was a barren case, I had an experience of a woman who had only one child, a son. The colleague who said that I knew she was being buried. You need to see the emotions that were involved in the burial of that woman. They were wishing her so. Some people were crying. Of course, most times when you were making those affirmations by the graveside, you cried because you were missing the person, you were leaving the person, you were cutting the person out. Therefore, the process of those affirmations were very, very intense. And we're telling the woman, oh, when you come back, you will come with children. You will come with wealth. You will come with material abundance. You will come with greater wisdom. All those things. If the person was not to have been foolish through his life, then that was opportunity for you to now give the person the opportunity to have a better life again. So the idea of reincarnation, it was something that Africa recognized, because life was cyclical. It was not linear, like the Western style of life. You die, you go into vegetable source, and you were gone. No. You died, you didn't become material. It is your body that became the material element that went to the soil. But the real you was pervasive. That's why they could talk to you. And in talking to you again, why were they using the corpse? Because the corpse was the body that they were used to. So it was a link between them and the person. So they are looking at the corpse, but they knew the person is no longer there. But there was no other way to look at the person, because the spirit, human beings need a reference point, and that's why the corpse was the reference point. If the grave had been covered, if the corpse had been buried, and somebody else came and wanted to still make some affirmations on behalf of that person, they will stand by the grave, because that became a reference point, and they can still have the image of the person clear in their head, so they could talk. That was African spirituality. It simply meant that society was a part and parcel of the human progression. Society has input, massive input to the life of a person. So there was no spirituality without society, and there was no society without spirituality. It was an intricate thing. It was woven. That idea of one person being in charge of everything did not exist. The idea of separating your life, your private life, from spiritual life did not exist, because it was your spiritual life that determined your private life. You were always moving with caution, because you knew that were forces, there were spirits around you. If you misstepped, they would deal with you. Nothing was done in secret, because your secret were always open. So your secret must be worthy of an open, in case there was an exposure. Life was beautiful in Africa. It wasn't as ugly as they made us see it. We have strange religion. In some instances, you had wayward practices that Africa would never have condoned, that have now been made African. This idea of getting rich quickly and doing some charms to, you go online, you see what people do. Women are taking some things on their bodies in the name of charming men. They call it spiritual. It's not spiritual. It is mediumic. It is an enslavement. It is a bondage kind of thing. Africa never welcomed that. It was not a practice. It's strange. Now, when the real people who understood spirituality left the scene every time in life of any community, the wayward people, small-time players, will take over the scene, because in this whole clear picture, there are people who knew nothing. Anything that is slightly seen to be magical attract their attention. Okay? And even in the level of the witch, there are even levels of witchcraft. There is even some levels which is positive, which tries to be of service to society, and there are the very base form of witchcraft that is all out for material things and suppression of people. The levels are different. But we are even saying that there's a level higher than all of them. If you are functioning at your full human capacity, just leave out the spirit now. If you are functioning at your full mental capacity, there is no force that can dominate you. Okay? They can only try, but they cannot hit you, because you have the gateway control. When you control your gateway, nobody else can come there. Because this incantation that Africans were doing, they were affirmations, pronunciations on what they wanted. But now there's another form. When you want to use forces outside yourself, outside that spiritual spirit forces, you use incantation also. And that is an assertion of your supremacy and dominance over them. Use those incantations and you got them. And there are some incantations people learn on the basis of being able to summon some forces and be able to use them. Now, at that level, you are no longer dealing with what might be termed African spirituality. You are not dealing with spiritism, okay, as is common in any society. That cannot be termed African. It is just normal. In every part of the world, people do these things. Let nobody insult you by telling you that your African society was wayward, was backward, was all about blood drinking and witchcraft. Because most of the things that they portray on TV as African, it's actually, even on social media, that you see people talk about African powers, they are actually talking about wayward witchcrafts, which will be, anybody that practices such things in our African society will be ostracized. It was as good as that. So African was a society that was elevated, that had a sense of proportion. Okay, it was not a society that was ridden by forces, because I don't know. There's a saying in the Igbo land, if you read Chinochi, they said, when a man says yes, his chi says yes. When a community says yes, because the chi of a community is the deity. So when a community says something, the deity must obey it. It's not every time they obey their deities. They could turn it around. There are sometimes a deity will be asking for a certain form of sacrifice, and the community say it is too much. They will negotiate it. There was this relationship, not of servitude, but of symbiotic relationship, because they know the spirit needed them to continue, and they needed the spirit to continue. But within that same African life, there were people who were higher than those levels of spirit relationship. They were on their own, living higher ideals. But those people never really came to the limelight to be respected, just as it still is today all over the world. True spiritual people, men and women, they are not the ones you see in the open. They don't come out to advertise themselves. They don't come out to solicit, because true spirituality is not proselytizing. They don't need people. They don't go out there advertising for people to come and join their fold. It is not. That's not spiritual. Spirituality is like school. Just like saying that you are in a university, you are in your first year, and they are coming to tell you to come to PhD. You just can't go to PhD. You have to first of all finish your first year, graduate, go to second degree if possible, and then move on to PhD. So spirituality is the highest level of consciousness of a human being, and it is a gradual process. Somebody graduates into it. It's not a thing that you advertise. So when they're talking about African spirituality, it's not really, when you talk about spirituality, it's not African, it's not European, it's not Indian, it's not Asian, it's not anything. It's just human. Spirituality is human consciousness. It's a human ideal. That's what it's all about. It's an understanding that there is the supreme being, and that the supreme being is accessible through a pattern, through a process, and that when you do it right, you can reach it. The fulcrum, the center of spirituality is meditation. Then next to that, what helps meditation is selfless service, love of your fellow man or fellow woman, fellow human, animals, plants, love of your environment. That is it. But note one thing: there is no spirituality without the mind. Now, this is it. If you ignore the mind will pull you out of spirituality, but you have to co-opt the mind into the process, because spirituality is beyond the mind. What more can a brother say? All I can say to you, friends, is that when you talk about life spiritual, it simply means that it's a life that is all pervasive. It is a life that affects your family life, your relationship, your career, and everything. If it cannot, if you now have separations in your life, say this is me being spiritual, this is me, no, you have to be complete. The African person, even at their levels, were completely locked in their spirituality. That was why community built the house for a young man to marry. Community participated in the marriage of a young man or a young woman. Community did everything together. The roads to the farms, the road on the streets, the road between one village and another community was a communal thing, and community walked those roads together. They cleared them, they cleaned them. They were grades of existence by your age, not by your substance. There was not such a class separation in Africa. If you were a very rich person, you will fall into your age group and walk within that age. And in that age group, you will take your position. You will not, because you are rich, supersede everybody. It was not done. There was this respect for the communal ethos, for the communal spirit. It was a great thing. It was a great thing in Africa that we lost. But the truth is, I know that we can get it back, but it seems as if it is an epoch that had ended. But right now, we're in a new world where there is competition, where spirituality does not affect people anymore. People don't know what is spirituality. What they are looking for is forces to help them achieve their goals. They are not willing to work the work. Meanwhile, the people that are running society, that are controlling all of us, are the people that are doing the work by themselves. It's secrets. One of the reasons I am doing these videos, why this channel exists, is to let you understand that you have to do it yourself. If you really want to be a successful person, you want to be fulfilled, you want that life, that dream life you are looking for, you have to achieve it yourself by your practice. That's why I'm teaching these things. To some people, it is very lonely. It make them feel that all the things they believed in is fake. The idea that some God has to do it for them, that somebody had to die for their sin, for them to be able to. My friend, the same Bible that tells you that still tells you, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You have to work it out. And your only work is to control your thoughts, control your emotions. If you're able to do those things, the rest will be taken care of by themselves. When you renew your mind, you become a better person worthy of spirituality. And our ancestors were very concerned about the mind. Hence, they had processes through which a filthy mind could be purified. And those processes are now seen today by the modern African as satanic, and they no longer practice them. Meanwhile, they have embraced a process that is far lower, which is a rank form of spiritism, where witches who are not even qualified to be admitted to the coven of witches are now leading them in the name of modernity. They now wear suits and they now organize events, and they carry the Bible in one form or the other, or the Quran in one form or the other, and they are dragging people into the grave of ignorance, of indolence. Nobody will do it for you. You have to do it. The work has to be done from the inside, and then from outside, results begin to happen. Do not let anybody run your show for you. Your show is yours. Run it. You have the resources, you have the capability, and you have the force. Thank you.